And we now see an additional violence between the Palestinians and the Israelis. This violence has been going on for over 100 years, and it is escalating. The trajectory of violence is becoming stronger and more so almost on a daily basis. The Israeli and the Palestinian governments take for granted the people of Israel and Palestine and get them involved in more and more violence and more wars, and it is time to make peace. We are proposing a federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine that would be created independently and separately from the Israeli and the Palestinian government. A federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine based on democracy. We are the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. You can see our website at ipconfederation.org. If you look at our website, you will see the Constitution that we are proposing. The Constitution is in 3 languages: Arabic, Hebrew, and English. We are proposing a democracy, a democratic government equal to the Palestinians and the Israelis together, those who reside and are citizens of Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. A separate, independent government, separate from the Israeli and separate from the Palestinian government, with 3 branches. Those branches are also separate branches. We will have a legislative branch with 300 parliament members, an executive branch with Palestinian and Israelis, 1 president, 1 vice president, and a judicial branch, all equal and fair under a democracy that will be elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. You could read the Constitution at ipconfederation.org. It's a very interesting read, and I hope you do that. You can also read the frequently asked questions that explains some of the issues that may come up in your mind when you read the Constitution. My name is Joseph Avasar. You could reach me at josephavassar@gmail.com. We are having a simulation today with Khalil Sayegh. Khalil Sayegh is a political analyst focused on Palestinian politics and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He is also the co-founder and president of the Agora Initiative. Khalil lived most of his life in Gaza and the West Bank, where he was involved in political activism and humanitarian initiatives. Khalil is featured in several outlets, including Al Monitor, The New Arab, The Economist, and The Wall Street Journal. He regularly appears on TV to offer analysis, including BBC, ABC Australia, and Al Jazeera. He holds a master's degree in political science from American University. We are going to have more simulations coming up. Our next simulation is with Andre X on October 13th of this year. He's a journalist, an anthropologist, and a human rights activist. On October 21st, we will have a simulation before students at Claremont College, the students of Professor Mark Juergensmeyer. We had simulations before his students many, many times before. The students are very engaged and interested. And this time we expanded the hours of the simulation in order to allow more students and more guests and more faculty to come in and participate. On October 27, we have Nizar Farsak. He's a lecturer at the Elliott School of International Affairs and trainer on leadership, negotiations, and advocacy with over 20 years experience in the Middle East and North Africa. On November 10, I just got an email from Dr. Avner Dinor. He pretty much agreed to participate. He wanted to have another conversation with me. I tried to have a conversation with him before the simulation, but he was not available. But he is a secular theologian and lecturer of Jewish study at Sapir, called Israel and Bar-Ilan University. We are showing in this simulation how a federal government could make peace by passing legislation that would be acceptable to both sides by virtue of political reality. We will demonstrate how the federal government will pass that legislation that threads the needle. What does it mean, thread the needle? It means that it passes legislation that neither side, neither government could say no to, that they will have to accept because they will lose political power within their own people if they reject the legislation. We are not proposing how the federal government should function in terms of substantive issues. We are only showing how possibly a federal government could pass legislation. But this is not our proposal regarding the federal government and how it should function. The federal government will function based on its own legitimacy, based on its own needs and its own interest. We are only proposing a system of government for the people of Israel and Palestine. We are not proposing substantive issues. What we are showing is examples of substantive issues that will pass both the federal government and the government of Israel and Palestine. We are asking you to participate in this simulation by asking questions and hold your comments to the end or write them on the chat feature. You can write the question. We ask you, please write the questions on the chat, and Nasir will administer the questions and will relay those questions to all of us verbally. He will also try to create questions from comments that you put in order to facilitate as much understanding of what we are proposing. Nasir, could you say hi, please?
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a 2-minute video that explains what the system of government we are proposing.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
The number 300 for parliament members was chosen in order to
The conflict between
to
Israelis
minimize
and Palestinians
the power and possible pressure on each parliament member. So if we have larger pool of parliament members, it would be very difficult to put pressure on all of them or on many of them. So it's important to minimize the pressure, and that's why we chose 300. Let's do a survey right now. Do you support a common federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine? We will compare that survey by conducting another survey at the end of the simulation. Another 5 seconds to vote. Okay, end the poll and publish it. 94%, 33 out of 35 voted yes. That's 94%. And 2 out of 35 voted no. That's 6%. And we will see if we made some changes at the end of the simulation. We are using the term confederation and federation in the same way. We use that both in terms of our Constitution. Confederation and federal government exist worldwide to address specific conflicts. Some governments refer to themselves as federal governments, while others use the term confederation. Definitions are not fixed and evolve with changing realities. In the context of Israel-Palestine, the IPC defines confederation as a shared government for the people of Israel and Palestine, guided by democratic principles outlined in the IPC Constitution, which can be found at ipconfederation.org. So if you ask, are you a confederation or are you a federation? We say we are both. And our definition is based on the Constitution, which is at ipconfederation.org, which I showed you at the beginning. This is the heart of the simulation. From now on, during the simulation, you will have to assume that the IPC was able to obtain major funding to recruit people to run for parliament and for president, both in Israel and Palestine. That we were able to create a platform for the election where 14 million people in Israel, Palestine, with the exclusion of children, will be able to vote. You will have to assume that we were able to provide a lot of advertising to explain the benefit of the federal government to the people of Israel and Palestine, and to show them that their governments have failed to give them security and peace, and that the federal government does not preclude the existence of the governments that they like, but it creates another platform for peace and that peace is better security than the continuation of war. You will also have to assume that 5 million people have voted. So when I say you have to assume that during the simulation. From now on, we are going to be acting as if all of these things will happen. And at the end, I will ask you, do you think it's realistic to think that these points that are right in front of you could be achieved? So you'll have to assume that 5 million people voted. Out of the 5 million people, 3 million Palestinians voted and 2 million Israelis voted. So that it's clear, we are speaking about Israel-Palestine, which means the area of Gaza, Israel, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. We are saying that it is possible to have 5 million people voting, and that's what we are acting under in this simulation today. You will also have to assume that the president received 1.5 million votes. I will act as the president as if I was elected. It just makes it easier for me to conduct a simulation. So that it's clear, I never intend to run. I'm not even qualified to be the president or to be elected at all, because I do not reside in the area of Israel and Palestine. I am a citizen of Israel, but I'm not a resident of Israel. Therefore, I am not qualified. But for the purpose of this assumption, you will have to assume that I was elected for the purpose of this simulation. You will also have to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in 300 districts. In fact, I will ask you to act as parliament member. You will also have to assume that in each district, we have 47,000 people. So if you divide 14 million by 300, you'll get 47,000 people. So if you have any questions about these assumptions, please write them on the chat, and Nasir will relay those questions to us. In the meantime, I'd like to go to Khalil and ask him to comment or ask questions regarding those assumptions. Khalil, please.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks
Hi.
everyone for being here. Looking forward to participate and learn more about this. I think, I guess, I mean, I don't really have that much questions yet because I went through these assumptions before, but I would just make a question so to start us off. So I would say the major funding we're talking about, would it be controlled by or donated by the Palestinian and Israeli government, or would it be just like somewhere like an outside funding that the new government would sort of try to obtain?
No, the funding will not be provided by the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We are seeking to create a federal government independent and separate from the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. And if the funding is provided by those governments, that means that we will not be independent and will not be separate. In fact, it would mean that we are dependent on those governments. And that would undermine our entire theory that we need to be independent and separate. The funding would be hopefully provided by worldwide people in Palestinians and Israelis and people from all over the world. I think that we would probably need somewhere around $100 million. It's a drop in the bucket, and it could be created. The problem that we have is not the funding, but awareness. The media is not picking up on this. That's the problem.
Got it.
Any other comments, Khalil, or questions regarding these assumptions?
No, I guess this is clear. So I assume from your answer to that this government wouldn't have authority to have any sort of taxation, right? So it would solely depend financially and fundraising or trying to gain money from memberships around the world.
No, this government will have taxation power. It's the
Okay.
only legitimate government in Israel, Palestine. It's not, we are not proposing a second-class government. We are proposing first-class government, the only legitimate government in Israel, Palestine, that will be elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. We are the only thing that gives the impression that we are second class is you give them veto power. We give them veto power on certain legislation, but we are not diminishing our status as a second class government. We are, in fact, the only government in Israel, Palestine that is elected by the people of Israel and Palestine, and we are the only one who have legitimacy.
So Joseph, there's a question. There's two of them. One of them is in regards to the districts, and I put a map proposing, like we never really narrowed down what districts are, but the map that I put kind of breaks down the territories and districts. This is just a proposal just for the sake of simulation. The other question is, and this one came up a few times, so maybe it's good to clarify this from Deborah, that there's 2 million Palestinians that are currently citizens of Israel. Where do they fall into in this confederation? Like, how does it break down?
Okay, regarding the first question, the district will be created by a computer algorithm. 47,000 people in each district. So it's hard to create a map. If you are, when you run, you'll know what district you belong to and who are the people running in your district. It will be created by a computer algorithm that includes 14 million people. Regarding the second question about...
Good, very well, thanks.
Please mute. There are 2 million Palestinian in Israel. There are 7 million Jews and 2 million Palestinians that are citizens of Israel. And there are about 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. It doesn't really matter what is your nationality or what's your religion. Everyone is entitled to vote, regardless of what is your religion and what is your nationality. Now, as far as being elected, that's a different story. So if you put yourself to be a parliament member, you have citizenship, you have residency, and it will go by what you declare to be your citizenship and your residency. And the people of Israel and Palestine, regardless of their religion or their nationality, will be able to vote for whoever they want, Palestinian or Israeli. So as far as the voting, it doesn't really matter your nationality or your religion. As far as being elected, yes, it does make a difference. People will have to vote based on how those candidates declare themselves to be, whether they are Palestinians or Israelis, based on their citizenship and residency. I hope I answered the question. Any other questions? Okay, so this is the area of Israel, Palestine. First, we are asking, we're going to be asking you to be parliament members in this simulation. So this is a simulation. It's not a lecture. You are participating and you are asked to be either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members, and you will have to decide what is your area, what is your district. Is your district in Khan Yunis, or is this your district in Dimona, or is your district in Tel Aviv, or in Jerusalem, or Nablus, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm asking you at this time to make a decision and to remain intellectually honest during this simulation. Are you a Palestinian parliament member or Israeli parliament member in this simulation? Please vote. Identify yourself as such. Are you a Palestinian parliament member in this simulation? Are you an Israeli parliament member in this simulation? And Khalid, you can choose to be if you want or not. It's up to you. All right. Can you publish the vote? We have 24 out of 38 that are Palestinian, 63%. And we have 14 out of 38 that are Israeli parliament member. That's 37%. And I ask you to remain in that capacity, and you'll be able to vote on legislation. I also need someone to be Israeli Prime Minister. Do I have a volunteer to be Israeli Prime Minister? I see, Oren, you raised your hand. Oren, do you have a question?
Yes, I don't understand why Palestinians get the Golan. They didn't fight and die for it. Israelis did. And it's not historically theirs anyway.
We didn't say that the Palestinians get the Golan. Nobody get that. This is the area of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, that includes the Golan Heights, Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza.
Yeah, but it's demarcated in green as the West Bank is. So I figured that meant it was Palestinian area.
Well, that's the map that you're right. The map gives the same color as the West Bank. You're right, but the area that we are speaking about is the whole area: Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, which includes the Golan Heights and the West Bank and Gaza. Are you willing to be, Oren? Are you willing to be Israeli Prime Minister in this simulation?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And Aziz, are you willing to be the Palestinian Prime Minister? Palestinian president?
If anybody can do it, because I have to be with the kids in the next 15 minutes, I'm not going to be able to hear it. If anybody else can do it, please.
Okay, Gottfried, are you willing to be the Palestinian president? Gottfried? Okay, we'll go on and see if someone else is willing to be the Palestinian president. So right now we have 300 parliament members, and we have less than 300, but we are assuming that we have the parliament members, and we have Israeli Prime Minister, Palestinian president, hopefully will come soon, so that it's clear. Oren, you are not allowed to vote in the government. You're a separate government. You're an Israeli government. You are not allowed to vote in the parliament. You are given a veto power, but you are not allowed to vote. The same for the president of Palestine, Saeed. You'll have to be the president of Palestine in the meantime. All right.
Okay.
So the districts may be mixed. In other words, a Palestinian, and since Palestinians and Israelis live together, many of the districts will be mixed. And some of them will be exclusively Israelis and some will be exclusively Palestinian because of the nature of the districts. First order of business after we had the election is to pass a constitution. This is a short version of the long constitution that we that I showed you at the beginning. Is there anyone who is willing to read out the constitution? Okay, I'll read it. We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli government, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislators and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a government, in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to the IPC legislation with Israelis and Palestinian judges with a system to avoid biased decision based on nationality. That means that we do not, our constitution prohibits us from undermining the Israeli or the Palestinian governments, and that's not our intention. We give the Israeli and the Palestinian governments a veto power if our legislation violates their sovereignty. Before we ratify the Constitution, if you have any questions, put them on the chat, and let's go to Khalil and ask you to give us your opinion regarding the Constitution, or if you have any questions, you're welcome to do so. Khalil, please.
No, yeah, I like the Constitution. I like the principles. I don't have any critiques of it. I think it's
Okay.
quite.
So, Nasir, do we have any questions from the audience about the Constitution?
Not about the Constitution.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Well, I mean, there's another question that Don Raphael, and I think you already explained it, but maybe you can clarify it, about mixed districts, if it will be considered Palestinian or Israel. And I think you did answer that, but maybe you can clarify a bit.
Well, a mixed district, it means that Palestinians and Israelis are in the same district.
Yeah, and that the candidates could be mixed, like, because some districts will have more than one representative, so they still have to be voted, and therefore these districts may have both Israelis and Palestinians, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So now I'm asking the parliament, not the president of Israel, not the prime minister of Israel or the president of Palestine, the parliament that was just elected. Remember, we just finished an election. The parliament needs to ratify the Constitution. You were elected to be a parliament member in the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation federal government, and you are required, I'm underlining the word required, to ratify the Constitution because you ran on the premise that you are accepting the Constitution and you are willing to work within the bounds of this Constitution. Palestinian parliament members, please vote to ratify the Constitution. If you fail to ratify the Constitution, you will be expelled from the parliament. And whoever gets the second number of votes in your district is elected as parliament member, and you are expelled. Okay, 5 more seconds to ratify. Publish the votes. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members ratified the Constitution. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please ratify the Constitution. Israeli parliament members. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members ratified the Constitution. This means that we now have a parliament that agrees on a principle stated in this Constitution, and we have the ground rules upon which we agree to play. we are now going to work based on transparency, on equality, and all the legislation we pass must conform to the Constitution. We all agreed to it, Palestinians and Israelis together. So this is a momentous occasion in the history of the Middle East. Not in the last 100 years, but ever. It never been done before that we have a constitution that was ratified by parliament, that was elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. Congratulations. This has never been done before in the history of humanity. The constitution that was just ratified and the election undermines the existing governments. That means the governments of Israel and Palestine, the separate governments, use of fear and hate to justify their action. They can no longer use their fear and hate to justify their action. It removes the collective stigma against Israelis and Palestinians. The stigma that we are unable to make peace with each other, that we are born to be fighting each other, and that we are almost by nature unable to make peace. That's the stigma, and the Constitution that we passed removes that stigma. It provides us, the federal government, us, the parliament members, me as the president, huge political capital that I can spend all over the world and in Israel, Palestine. It will compel the government and other organizations to contribute politically and financially and economically to our government. So to answer your question, Khalil, yes, we are using that to get some funding, but we also have the political power to tax the people of Israel and Palestine because we are elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. And it gives us, Palestinians and Israelis together, new self-image. So congratulations, we made a huge difference in the area of Israel and Palestine. So now we are passing the first legislation granting a veto power to the separate governments. Nasir, can you read that legislation, please?
Sure. Give me 1 second. Let me make it bigger. Granting a veto power to the separate governments, the Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel and Palestine from the river to the sea. We recognize the Palestinian and Israeli governments and are seeking their cooperation to implement our vision of peace by giving them a veto. We will do our utmost to satisfy the essential needs of each government. We are pleading with the Palestinian and Israeli public to understand that while we would like to pass the best legislation possible to improve their lives, under these constraints, a perfect legislation is not possible. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel on issues which it is indispensable, the Palestinian government on issues in which it is indispensable. In the event of changes in the entirety of the Israeli or Palestinian government, this legislation may be amended or repealed subject to the IPC constitution. The parliament will decide on indispensability. Vetoes may be bestowed individually or collectively.
So we decide whether our legislation violates the sovereignty of Israel and Palestine by deciding whether those governments are dispensable or indispensable. So just examples of indispensable. If we pass legislation, these are just examples. These are not exhaustive list of what's dispensable or indispensable, just example. If we pass legislation regarding the use of land, the government of Israel and Palestine are indispensable. We need to give them a veto power. If we pass legislation regarding police force, the government of Israel and Palestine are indispensable. Or removal of the wall, they are indispensable. However, if we pass legislation regarding our budget, we can do it whether or not we give a veto power to the Israelis or the Palestinian government. We will not give them a veto power on that issue. We will not give them a veto power regarding ratifying our Constitution. We can ratify the Constitution or appointing judges or ministers. Now, why do we give them a veto power? Because a veto power provides a safety net to both sides. It basically tells both sides, if you like your government, if you feel your government gives you security, then your government has a veto power on issues that makes the difference to you. It increases the likelihood of Israelis and Palestinian participation because they will feel safe that their governments have a veto power. It decreases Israeli and Palestinian governments' opposition. The Israeli and the Palestinian government will not be able to claim that we are a subversive organization that wants to undermine the Israeli or the Palestinian government. And it gives legal protection to our candidates. If we are running, now you've been elected, you have legal protection because you are not claiming and you did not swear allegiance to a government that wants to undermine the Israeli or the Palestinian government. And it compels us, the federal government, to thread the needle because we understand that we give them a veto power. And because they have a veto power, we have to pass legislation that would be acceptable to both sides. And it creates a platform of negotiation with the deadline. So Khalil, do you have any more comments after you saw this legislation before we take a vote on this legislation?
I guess the question on like what's the two governments have right to vote on to veto on, sorry, or not, it's like I guess you said something that we get to decide what is they have the right to vote on or not. I guess the question is like, why do we have the right? Like, let me reframe it. So if we get to decide what the other government gets to vote over or not, it means ultimately we have the ultimate power. So we might as well just dismantle both of these governments. It doesn't seem to me that the veto they get is a real veto if we decide what are the issues they can veto or not veto over, no?
Well, we are also limiting ourselves when we give them a veto. First of all, just as a matter of principle, in my opinion, getting rid of these two governments is probably ideal. These governments are the problem. They are not the solution, but it's not possible to get rid of them. They are too politically and economically and militarily strong. So we have to deal with them based on the reality that they exist. Now, because of that, we choose to give them a veto power, and we also limit ourselves. We say, look, we will pass legislation that will be acceptable to you. And if it's not acceptable to you, we recognize your power. We don't recognize your legitimacy. We don't recognize that, but we recognize your power and we give you a veto power. Otherwise, if we say, oh, we just want to get rid of you, that means that we are a subversive organization. We will never be able to come into reality. And the Israeli and the Palestinian governments will have legitimacy in trying to undermine and arrest our candidates and whoever is involved, because they will claim that we are a subversive organization. All right, let's go to the Palestinian parliament members. Please vote on granting a veto power. Palestinian parliament members. We need 55% of the Palestinian and 55% of the Israeli parliament members to vote on this legislation in order for it to become law. And by the way, the Israeli and the Palestinian governments do not have a veto power over this legislation that gives them eventually a veto power. But they don't have a veto power on this legislation. We can pass it without giving them a veto. All right, publish the vote. 95% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of giving them a veto power. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. We need 55% of the Israeli. We already have 95% of the Palestinian. Israeli parliament members, please vote. All right, publish the vote. 9 out of 9, 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. So this legislation now becomes our law. It's not part of our constitution. It's a statute that we have passed in order to facilitate and express and explain who are we giving a veto power to. All right, let's go to the first substantive legislation. Again, we are not proposing that the federal government will duplicate this suggestion. We are just showing in this simulation how a federal government could pass legislation that it will be difficult for the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to veto. So let's go to the first legislation. Nasir, can you read it, please?
Yes, I can read it. The only thing is, I think Saeed said something that he is leaving, so I think we might need a Palestinian president.
Oh, okay.
So can someone else volunteer, because before we read this, because this requires a veto, so we have to have a Palestinian president.
Do we have someone who is willing to be a Palestinian president?
Can
Please
our guest be a Palestinian president?
Yeah,
Khalil,
Okay, sure.
you're president for Palestine today.
okay.
I'll still be here, but I cannot focus right now.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, because I messaged you and you told me that. So let Khalil be the president, Saeed, so that we can so you can concentrate on the kids. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. So rebuilding Gaza and Southern Israel. The IPC is the only legitimate government in Israel and Palestine, consisting of 300 parliament members elected by the entire population. Approximately 125 members represent the destroyed areas. The IPC is committed to the well-being of all people, including the 5 million individuals directly affected by the violence since October 7th. The IPC believes that the future of Gaza and the Israeli people is interconnected. It is unlikely that the Israeli and Palestinian governments will be able to restore a normal, peaceful existence in the foreseeable future. The IPC is requesting a $50 billion grant from the international community, which includes Israel and Palestine, to fund and coordinate the rebuilding of the devastated areas. The IPC will prioritize the following. Number one, the IPC is calling for an immediate ceasefire and the immediate return of all political prisoners in Israel and Palestine to their homes. Number two, rebuilding thousands of homes, roads, hospitals, civic buildings, and infrastructure to facilitate the immediate return of all people to their homes. Number three, restoring law and order and civil societies that have been destroyed. The government of Israel and Palestine are given a veto power.
All right, so we have the political power, the political legitimacy, because we are elected by the people of Israel and Palestine, and we received international support. And now I am the president. I'm going all over the world asking people, governments, and international companies to contribute to a $50 billion grant that will be managed and facilitated by the World Bank. Before we take a vote, Khalil, as our guest, not as the president, as our guest, do you have any comments or questions regarding this legislation?
Yeah, so the question is this is more like a sort of theoretical question on the entire thing related to that. So we're talking about a government that will be created to solve issues, or are we or to solve the conflict, or are we talking about something that will comes after solving the conflict? And I explain what I mean by that. So when we propose a legislation like this one, it assumes that the government already exists, and that despite that this government that we are envisioning exists, still October 7th would happen, and still the genocide in Gaza would happen. So it just makes me wonder, like what's the purpose of the government we're trying to establish, unless this is just some sort of like a future looking. This is like not right. Like assuming, like the question, I think, assuming we fulfilled the government that we want to build, or the parliament or whatever, would this still be happening in Gaza? If it still happens, I don't know why we need that government, or why it should exist even.
Why the federal government should exist?
Yeah, if the conflict still happens while the federal government still exists.
Oh, because that's the only legitimate government that can be elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. It's the only democracy. In fact, the question should be the other way around. Why should the Palestinian or the Israeli government exist? These are governments that have proven themselves to be unable to give peace to the people of Israel and Palestine. We are a government that will stay forever and eternity. The idea is to make the Israeli and the Palestinian government in the future irrelevant, because the Israeli and the Palestinian governments, they politicize religion, and their existence is directly related, and their support is directly related to the perpetuation of this conflict forever. We want to stop that. So the question should be the other way around. Why should they continue to exist? Not why should we continue to exist?
No, I guess like my question is in very specific context. If assuming today, like this government exists in real world, you still think something like what's happening in Gaza could happen, and we still could be discussing a registration like that? That's the question.
Well, we are dealing with reality the way it is right now. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
If we had this government in, we are proposing this government now for several years. If we had it before October 7th, October 7th, in my opinion, would not have occurred. If we had this in 1947, we would not have had the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at all. We would have lived in peace and with respect. The creation of a Israeli Jewish government did not help the Jewish people or the Palestinian people. But we are dealing with reality the way it is. We just finished the election. And we want to be there forever. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to the Palestinian parliament members. Please vote on this legislation, rebuilding Gaza and Southern Israel. Publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Now, Khalil, you will have to assume your second role, which is you are now the president of Palestine. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No, wouldn't veto.
All right. Let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I would not veto this.
All right. Okay, so I think this legislation demonstrates how we can thread the needle and make peace and help the people of Israel and Palestine together. And it makes our government more attractive and more legitimate because we are truly helping the people of Israel and Palestine. All right, let's go to the next. And by the way, if you have any comments or questions, put them in the chat, and Nasir will turn your comments into questions, and will also ask those questions. The next legislation is make peace with Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. Nasir, can you please read this legislation?
Sure. Make peace with Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. We are the parliament members of the Confederation, Government of Israel, Palestine. We are the only legitimate government in the region. Our people have experienced wars and violence for over 100 years. The Israeli and Palestinian governments have failed to bring peace to the people in Israel, Palestine. Therefore, we are taking the initiative to protect all the people in Israel, Palestine, and provide them with peace. To achieve this, we are forming our own delegation to directly meet with the authorities in Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran for the purpose of making peace in the region. Our intention is to demand that all these governments and entities agree to cease violence and threats against each other and work towards a lasting peace, and to work as a facilitator and promoter of peace between these governments. Our goal is to be fair and objective and to expose any governments or entities that pose a threat to our people.
All right, so we are the government of the entire area. The bombs are falling on our heads. We are suffering, killing, injuring of our people. It doesn't really matter to us the nationality or the religion of the people, of our people that are suffering now for years, and we want to make peace because we were able to create a government for the people of Israel and Palestine together. And as the government of Israel and Palestine together, we want to make peace with Iran, with Lebanon, with Yemen, and with Syria, and the government of Israel. Before we go to a vote, Khalil, do you have any questions on that issue, on this legislation?
No, I think it's quite straightforward.
Yeah, and this legislation, we don't give the Israeli or the Palestinian government a veto power because we can do it whether or not they want to block us or not. They are dispensable. They don't have a veto. They are dispensable. Nasir, are there any questions from the audience? If not, we'll go to a vote. Okay, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on this legislation. Publish the votes. 100% of the Palestinian parliament, 95%, I'm sorry, voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Remember, we need 55% of the Israeli and 55% of the Palestinian. We are exceeding that by far on both sides. Publish the vote. 91% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. So congratulations. We can form our own delegations and go to all these countries and demand peace and find out what's going on. Why are we fighting? Especially now when the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is practically over. Don, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question regarding sending a delegation to meet with Lebanon. In that case, are you meeting with the formal government of Lebanon or the Hezbollah?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, we want. I think that the American delegation, Amos Hochstein, is also I'm not sure if he's meeting with
Yeah.
Hezbollah, but yes, we definitely want to meet with Hezbollah. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go to our next legislation, and that is a common police force. This legislation gives a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Nasir, are you up to reading another one, or you want me to read it?
I could read it, no problem.
Good.
So, common police force, equal number of Israeli and Palestinians at each level, distinct uniform for the common police force different from the Israeli and Palestinian police force, independent of the Israeli and Palestinian security forces, in cooperation with the separate Israeli and Palestinian authorities, address sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirements, facilitate the operation of the joint economic zones, investigate corruption by administrators who refuse to teach tolerance, investigate allegations of intolerance and racist hate crimes against Israelis and Palestinians, assist in managing checkpoints, guard the parliament building and threats against members of the Confederation, facilitate access to and safety of religious facilities. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government and the Palestinian government. It should be government there, right? We bestow upon them the veto power, which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
So that you just have some context, there are other legislation that we propose, and that is to require both the Israelis and the Palestinians to teach tolerance and understanding, and to teach Arabic and Hebrew in both schools, and to have students exchange, Palestinians and Israelis. We also propose creating a common economic area between Israel and Gaza that will have an international airport and international seaport, and to also have a common a joint economic zone between Jerusalem and Ramallah in the area called Nasir, can you remind me? The
Say
area,
it again?
yeah,
The-
Kalandia, yes.
Kalandia, there's
Yeah,
the checkpoint, you mean?
Checkpoint.
yeah. So we want to change those into a joint economic zone. So that's why we need the common police force. That's the largest context of the common police force. Now, Khalil, as our commentator today, you will also have the second role of Palestinian president, but as the commentator, do you have any questions regarding or comments regarding this common police force?
No, I think as principle, it's great. Fully supportive. I think in terms of practicality, I think you'd find a lot of opposition on the Israeli and the Palestinian side for this, just because of lack of trust. I think trust takes time, and trust doesn't exist there now.
So you believe that we will find opposition from the Israeli and the Palestinian governments?
Yes.
Okay, but what is trust got to do with it? We are, I mean, I'm being facetious, but we are a common government. Our police force is under the federal government. What issues of trust could come up?
I think it's not government lack of trust. It's a intercommunal lack of trust that has been building for years, and it would be quite difficult to move from a place where you have tens of thousands of people being massacred today to a place where both of these people are joining forces in a uniform and police force carrying guns together. I don't think it would be that easy, unfortunately.
Okay. Nasir, do we have any questions from the audience regarding this legislation?
Not really regarding the legislation. There's a chatter about some other stuff, but it has nothing to do with this. So
Okay. All right. Let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Palestinian parliament members on joint police force. Do you support an Israeli-Palestinian Confederation police force? Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Israeli parliament members, please vote. Publish the vote. 88% of the Israeli parliament members voted in this legislation. So we have very, very strong support from the community of Israel and Palestine that is represented by the parliament of Israel and Palestine to have a common police force. So now we are going to go to Khalil again as the president of Palestine. Mr. President, are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes.
And are there any changes that you require in order to remove your opposition to it?
I think I'd like to see more specific roles for how much power this police force has, particularly when it comes over holy sites in Jerusalem for the Arab community, the Palestinian community. So that's one of the things.
So you are not satisfied with the language that addresses the sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirement?
No.
What else would you like?
Again, this is me putting the hat of the president.
Yes, I understand that. You are now where you are in the shoes of the president.
Yeah.
What else would you like to add?
I think the Palestinian position is quite clear on that. I think they want an exclusive sovereignty over the Muslim sites. That's how I'd look at it. And I think on the Israeli side, it's the same when it comes to Jewish sites.
Okay.
But I'm responsible for the Palestinian side in this capacity.
All right. So if we specify that the police force will give exclusive management to the Palestinian of the holy site, but the area itself will be secured by the police force, will that be acceptable to you?
It could be.
Or what about securing access to? Because I think the concept here is maybe securing people going to and from the holy places, not actually managing the holy places.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. Okay, so let
Khalil,
me...
the checkpoint thing didn't bother you?
No, I didn't see it.
Okay.
The Qalandia checkpoint, you mean?
Yeah, there's an issue about like managing the checkpoint. Just hold on one second. He'll pull it up 1 second.
Okay.
I assume the checkpoint will be transformed to something else. No?
Okay, so we added this proviso, addresses sensitive religious, cultural, and language requirements, giving each side exclusive management of the holy site, but giving the common police force the right to enforce entry and exit routes to the holy sites. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, but considering that if anyone would pick up a history book, they would know that Al-Aqsa Mosque used to be a basilica church. So it's not a Muslim site, it's a Christian holy site that was taken over by the Abbasids when they invaded Israel. So now that we all know that, maybe we can stop acting like it's exclusively Muslim and let Jews and Christians go up there to pray. I don't mean inside the mosque, because they wouldn't do that anyway. But I'm not the only Jewish person that's a little bit wanting to vomit every time I see, a defunct, non-existent terrorist group like Hamas. Don't worry, we'll get rid of the rest of them soon. Using it as a battle cry to get your people to come murder our people, and then it turns out we're a lot better at murdering you. So it doesn't really work out well for you to get upset about this. Therefore, having exclusive sites about fairy tales, which all religions are, is not healthy for us. So, you may not like the extremist settlers that go up there and pray, but they're actually not hurting you. They're just praying. And there's about a same chance of Allah being as real as Hashem, which is close to zero. So if we can all be humble enough to accept that we're all following fairy tales and no fairy tale is superior to another, and none of them have any proof that anything actually happened, and they are not history books, not the Bible, and certainly not the Quran, which just rewrites most of the Bible, then we can kind of start getting along. People that want to believe this stuff.
Why this guy is talking?
All right, wait.
I know. What am I talking about?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a religious argument.
Yeah, your role is the
The
Prime
bottom
Minister.
line
We're
is,
doing.
the bottom line, Mr. Prime
You were
Minister.
dancing around it very carefully, but that's exactly what you were saying.
Okay, but your role is the Prime Minister.
I don't want to turn this into a religious argument.
To the Temple Mount.
No,
you don't get exclusive
Mr.
access to the Temple Mount.
Oren
Minister.
Menashe is brainwashed Israeli. Leave him alone. You cannot be a prime minister. Sorry.
All right. Okay. The bottom line is,
thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, you are not vetoing this legislation, correct?
No, I'm just saying nobody gets exclusives on anything.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Jews go to the Temple Mount. Muslims can go to the Western Wall. Everybody needs to get along for a change.
Whatever statement you want to make to appease your constituents, it doesn't really matter to us. The bottom line is you agree to this legislation, and that makes it easier for us to promote peace in Israel.
Yeah, as long as the police are not being weaponized to deny one religious group access to a place versus another, then I'm fine with it.
Okay, and I am the president, and you know how to contact me, and the same for the president of Palestine. You know how to, and we will work with your people to facilitate equal and sensitive access to religious sites. Thank you. All right, so let's go to the post-simulation survey. After participating in the simulation, do you support a common federal government for the people of Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza to make peace? Please vote. Okay. And by the way, the president, Mr. Prime Minister, you can vote too. Now, this is outside this. This is just outside the simulation. You can vote too.
Excuse me, Joe. Nothing came on my screen to vote.
Okay. Are you voting yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't come on my screen either. All right, let's publish the vote. 100% of those who voted yes in favor of the federal government. No one voted no. So I assume, Oren, that you did not vote no either, which is a very good sign. And I thank you so much. And now I just want to make some closing remarks, and then we'll go to open discussion. A common democratic confederation government can bring peace. And peace is the ultimate solution. Peace is the only solution, the only vision in the future. Online elections is feasible. We do it all the time. I heard some very, very encouraging news regarding online elections. I heard that the astronauts in space are voting in the American elections. So if the astronauts in space can vote securely in the American election, I think that it would be much, much more realistic to believe that Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Israel can vote online in a secure way. 1 week of war between Israel and Gaza. Now it even became a lot more. We are including Lebanon, we're including this I wrote like several months ago when it was $3 billion a week. It ballooned to an unbelievable number. I don't know what the number is, but I mean, with all the spending that is on the war, billions and billions of dollars is bringing more violence to the area, and a drop in the bucket of $100 million could make peace. The current governments of Israel and Palestine are not legitimate in the area because they are not elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. The Palestinian government is not elected by the Israelis. The Israeli government is not elected by the Palestinian. There is no legitimate government in the area. We will be the only legitimate government. Democracy for the people of Israel and Palestine together could bring peace. So I'd like to go back to to open this to a open discussion. Please keep your discussion to the assumptions. Are these assumptions realistic? Could we achieve those assumptions and make them a reality? If so, please discuss that. This is what it would cost to have $100 million. That's what we can buy with $100 million. Or we can make historical peace for the people of Israel and Palestine together. So let's go now. And Nasir, you can take over the discussion now. Oh, you have a question first. Go ahead, Nasir.
Actually, I do have a question, and I wanted to say that about the questions, like try to be focused. We do welcome comments, but we don't want it to be monologues that last because, you know, we want to give our guests time to speak. So my question, and I'll go first, is to Khalil, my good friend. I know Khalil. It's been about maybe a few years now. And I want to say that I know he works with many organizations that work with both Israeli and Palestinian humanitarian and peace activists. Based on your experience and your experience being from Gaza and whose family was affected by this war, family members of yours who were lost during this war, very close to you. How does this confederation appeal to you now for someone who's been so involved in peace activism? How has it affected you, and how do you see it, like, because many people have lost hope in things like this?
Excellent question.
Oh, this is a great question, Nasir. I think the dark reality today is that people have lost hope in any light of reconciliation or any aspiration that reconciliation is possible. You know, if you are a kid in Gaza and you've lost everyone that you know, in this war. And if you are just in Gaza and you've seen that over 40,000 people were killed, entire neighborhoods were devastated, lost everything, I would be surprised if you have any hope in peace, in any type of peace, especially one that require a lot of trust, like one that we're talking about, the confederation, or even a one-state solution, or whatever. Any solution that means that Palestinians and Israelis have to live with each other daily, it would be very hard for people to believe in, because right now it's there, an entire generation is being born with the idea that the other side is the criminal that wants to kill us, and that is on some level true, because it's actually happening. People are being killed from the other side, and that's the only image constructed from them. However, as someone who is on one level involved with it, I mean, as you noted, I have family in Gaza, people in Gaza who were affected, but on the other hand, kind of removed from it, because since 2 years I'm here in the US. I tried to see the two angles of that, and the one that is a bit more removed, less emotional about it, I see the value of that. I think it could be a good thing. However, I'm just more skeptical of the approach where we just try to say, oh, well, both there is violence and we're both sort of involved at this and in the same level. I think it's not that. It's not true. I think that the Palestinian people, unfortunately, don't have as much say or power in it. And I say unfortunately because have we had more power or more say in it, I'd be pushing more the Palestinians to do more things. But the ultimate truth is Israel has much more power and thus much more responsibility, and they can move things much quicker. But also the unfortunate reality, it means that for someone like me, a Palestinian, I don't have as much saying on the Israeli side to have them move toward a solution. So that's sort of a long-winded answer, Nasir. I'm sorry. I hope I answered your question, though.
I just want to comment on your comment. You spoke about trust. This formula is not about trust. It's about transparency.
Yeah.
Your governments do not work on trust. Good governments work on transparency. The Israelis don't trust each other. They call each other criminals. A lot of the Israelis are in prison because they are corrupt. So as the Palestinians. No government should be relying on trust. In fact, I think that was the mistake of the Israeli government, that it relied on trust, that, okay, you are Jewish people, we can trust you, and you will do the best for us. And it turned out they didn't. They did the best for themselves. A good government is based on transparency. A good government is always have lack of trust, but transparency makes up for the lack of trust. We want to know what you're doing, and we want to know what I am doing. If it's open, if it's transparent, then we can move forward. It's not about trust. We don't need trust. Trust is the enemy of a good government. Transparency is what the government needs. Shlomo.
Sorry to a little slightly disagree. I think there should be trust, but of course it is maybe utopian, you may argue, but there should be trust that the government wants the good of the people and does whatever it can to improve the life of people, the people who elected the government. Anyway, but yeah, I have a question to Khalil. We are trying here in the US to do whatever we can to stop this genocide and to stop this madness, murderous madness that we see in the Middle East right now. And the question to you is, we go to the Congress and we try to convince, you know, the representatives. Usually we don't meet them, we meet their staff. And nothing happened. Do you have any idea what else could we do here in the United States to stop this bloodshed and murder of children in Gaza.
Yeah, the ultimate truth from my point of view, I mean, and that's away from the subject today. The sad reality is in the short term, there's very little we can do besides protest and protest and protest until we see some sort of change. Because the way the political system works in the US, and you all know and understand, is that political elites are not as responsive to regular constituency. Usually, as you said, you show up to Congress, yes, they'll host you, and then there is a young staffer who usually is an intern who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, right? He'll take notes. Most likely a Congress member would never hear these notes. But then if you're a powerful lobbyist group, let's say you're ABAC or J Street, or even like, you know, the tobacco lobbyists did listen to you because there is an interest involved, etc. Now, there are two ways of building a powerful interest group in the US, a group that they would listen to you. One is to have enough money for the campaigns or all that, or to have a mass movement that is powerful enough that affects the electoral system. And thus they would want to listen to you. The unfortunate reality, the pro-peace groups in the US don't have neither of these powers, right? We don't have the mass movement that is reasonable enough to know how to appeal to Congress members and to the mainstream American public opinion, nor do we have the money to have some sort of ABAC or J Street. This leaves us in a very vulnerable place. And I think long term, if Palestinians and Jewish Americans or even Israeli Americans who are genuinely interested in peace manage to build the type of institutions I'm talking about, I think long term we can see change in that opinion. But in order for this to success, it has to speak a language that the mainstream American constituency and elites can be convinced of. And I don't see any movement today, unfortunately, that's speaking that language.
Thank you. Did you have any other questions, Shlomo, before I move
No,
on?
we have small, if not now, we have Code Pink, of course, and we have the Jewish Voice for Peace and some other groups that are trying, but we are too small. And you're right, it needs a mass movement, and hopefully we'll get it somewhere, sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Shlomo. Before Saeed, if anyone else has any questions or quick comments, please raise your hand and I will call on you in the order. Go ahead, Saeed.
Good morning. Nice to meet you, Khalil. Ahla wa sahla feek. Khalil, I'm a Palestinian. Been living here since 1992. Go back and forth from California to Palestine. My family immigrated to America in 1912. As a matter of fact, I have the highest Palestinian cousin in Brazil who ever reached office in politics. My question is actually about the Palestinians. I see us as Palestinians, South America, we are more active and we are more powerful and we are effective in politics. But in North America, I see the Arab and the Palestinians are kind of different. We not really taking advantage of our constitutional right, you know, to vote, to be part of lobbyists and to be effective in. And seeing a group like the IPC give me the hope that I'm seeing my, you know, Jewish brothers and sisters trying to work things out. But as a Palestinian, what we are doing wrong in this country, Khalil, like why we are not taking advantage of the United States of America and try to make our voice heard. What's wrong with us? Where we are going wrong in this country and why we cannot move to get attention in this country? Thank you.
No, that's a good question. Obviously, like the way I look at it is again, I'm not an American Palestinian. I moved to America 3 years ago, but I've been back and forth between the US and Palestine for like 5 years before. So that's how I look at it. As someone who's lived between Ramallah and Gaza, and now I've been here for almost 3 years, I'm quite involved in the community. I'd say the following. I'd say two things. One, that a lot of our perception that the Palestinian community not really as active and using the system is not really true, because there are so many. That's the one. The second is, yes, there is so much critique to how we are conducting ourselves here. But the first is yes, we are involved, but we don't see it a lot because as much as we are involved, the other side is much more involved than us and much more powerful than us. And the reason why, simple reason, they've been here much longer than the Palestinians. They sort of more entrenched in the community. They were much more successful building institutions. That's normal to have disparity. As you said, in Latin America, let's look at Chile or Brazil or even Salvador, you'll see the Palestinian community much more organized, much more businessmen and women, and it's a different dynamics there. So that's the reason. Another thing that adds to that is that the Palestinians have so much responsibility, they feel that of urgency, that also distract them on how they work. I'll give you an example. So I've been trying to organize the more of the Palestinian business people to do more advocacy for the Palestinians, etc. They were all really not interested, and they don't have the capacity for a simple reason, because they are all focused on how to feed the people in Gaza, how to care for the surviving widows, the kids that they've lost everyone in Gaza. So these, I think, are the reasons. And I think a lot of our community in the US felt so much alienation and betrayal by the system that they don't want to be involved anymore. And I see this among college students a lot. I mean, they feel the racism, they feel how much, powerful groups have caused them harm and the Palestinians harms. And the response is that I just don't want to be involved. Now, you and I understand that this is not the best response. And the best response is like, no, I'm going to double down on how to use the system, learn how to use it, build coalitions, etc., which takes long time, obviously. But the unfortunate reality that people react differently. I hope that's a helpful answer.
I would like to add to, or maybe even disagree with you regarding why, what do we need to do and why are we not progressing? I think that the reason we are not progressing is because we are not focusing on the future. We are focusing, whenever the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is being discussed, it is always discussed, or most of the time is discussed, in terms of the past. The Jewish Israeli side speak about the Holocaust and the pogroms and anti-Semitism, and never again, Israel will never be subjected to another Holocaust. That's the main motivation of the Jewish side. And the Palestinian side, speaking about the Nakba, about the expulsion of the Palestinians, about the occupation, but neither side is speaking about the future. And both, and people that are not really involved in the conflict, it doesn't motivate them when you speak about the past. They don't get excited about the past. But if we speak about the future, and the past is really about stagnation. If we speak about the future and we speak about a vision, then people will get excited. And I think that neither side, the Palestinian side or the Israeli side, perhaps for their own reasons, or maybe for lack of vision, I don't know what the reason is, we do not speak about the future. We don't. And that, there is no excitement here. There is, it's like speaking with people that only speak about the past. It's not exciting. What we need to do is speak about a vision for the future. And I know I'm selling the IPC, but there is nothing wrong with that. We are about the future. And we need to speak about the future, about a vision for the future of democracy, things that people in the West take for granted. Democracy, equality, justice, constitution, and if we speak about that in terms of Israel-Palestine, neither side will be able to object to it. I think that's the most beautiful thing about the IPC, is that it creates, you see these people voting almost 90, 100% in favor of everything that we pass, is because there is no rational reason to oppose it. There is no, we are speaking about the future, about a vision for the future, and that gets people excited, and that's what we have to do.
Before
I agree
hold on,
100%.
Aziz, Saeed, hold on one second. We have a order. We're gonna go by Oren, Una, Godfrey. I'm gonna let Don go before Saeed because Saeed spoke up already. But before we move on, just real quick in regards to Arab Americans, and then as far as in the U.S. System, you have to also understand that in the United States government, in the Congress even, just the ADC interview that took place last week, some of the things that were said to the ADC members, that you are pro-Hezbollah, that you are pro-Iran, it's legal in the U.S. Congress to say anti-Arab, anti-Islamic things. They can get away with it. You can't say that about Jews or blacks or Hispanics without outrage. There'll be public outrages and stuff. So it is true from the organizational front with like what Khalil was saying, but you have to understand it is perfectly normalized in the U.S. government to say terrible anti-Arab things to people like the ADC who would not, these are not Hamas people. These are not people who are supporting Hezbollah or Iran. These are people who support democracy. Anyways, Oren, go ahead. Please, comments and questions, try to make them so that we can fit everybody in. So, no long monologues, please. Go ahead, Oren.
I think I have a radical solution. It's we have to all embrace humility here. I mean, I'm a dual Israeli American. There's Palestinians that are dual Palestinian American. So we all have a different perspective. We've lived somewhere else. I think it's harder for the people who've only lived here. But the humility to me begins with George Carlin, who was very pro-Palestinian. He said rights are cute and fictional. So let's all stop talking about our rights, because the more we argue about stupid shit like that, the more we're going to keep fighting each other. I have the right to this, you have the right to that. BS. There's almost 1 million settlers, and there's still fantasies that they're going to just kick them all out. That's not how it works. Facts on the ground trump rights, even in international law. So the society is integrating, even though it may not be with the optimal people. It is already integrating, and I think that's a good thing, because when the settlements left Gaza, Hamas took over. So then then they can say anything about the Jews, and they start brainwashing 5-year-olds, telling them Jews have horns and all this stuff. So we have to have something different.
Can you wrap up, please, so we
Kind
can
of
move on to the
extreme.
next?
It's kind of extreme.
Hold on.
Have to have a different way of looking at things.
Okay, thank you. Khalil, would you like to respond?
Oren either doesn't understand how contradicting what he's saying is, or he is doing it in purpose, like in design, because he starts by saying we have to have humility and accept that none of us have rights. Fine, I can accept that. Obviously, this could be a manipulative statement. It's in a way that, let's not talk about our rights. And then he jumps to say the most extreme ideological point of view from the other side. But because he started it with this opening, one can conclude either he's not aware of how contradicting both of these things have said are, or he's saying it to manipulate us, to make the Palestinians shut up and not defend themselves and their rights when he makes such a ridiculous claim that Palestinians are feeding their kids hate, etc. I mean, I lived in Gaza, I lived in the West Bank. I've done enough research on education system, textbooks in Israel and Palestine, etc., to know that they're not perfect in any means, but such ridiculous right-wing claims that have been made that Palestinians feed their kids to hate, etc., is not true. Palestinian kids don't need to learn why to hate the Israelis from their textbook. They just need to open their window and look at the humiliation they're facing under this brutal occupation forces that abuse them, that bomb them, that killed their fathers, that killed their kids, that killed members of their families. So stop with this nonsense. That's really extremely, like, not even like just extremely low quality propaganda. It's not even a good quality propaganda. And on the other side, yes, there is obviously hate on the Israeli side, etc. But also there is a construct of events that lead people to believe what they believe. So talk about humility, and you want to talk about humility. You know what's the first step of humility is not to assume that the other side is just evil, producing that their kids hate, etc., etc. Have some humility and see the world as they see it before you try to preach humility to anyone.
Thank you. Go ahead, Una.
Okay, thank you. First of all, Joe, thank you again. I'm very a fan of yours. Now, number two, we were talking about a future. Well, how on earth can those poor Palestinians have a future? Israel is wiping everything out, doctors, teachers, everything that will help them. And they are the most amazing people they are. I live with them in Ramallah, and I'm telling you, they never feed their kids on bad publicity. Number two, America. Let's discuss about America. Congress is the biggest AIPAC convention. Even if you don't like it, it's full of Zionist American, and they're paying so much money to pay for settlers to go and live in Palestine. Yes, actually, I will say Palestine, stealing the land. Therefore, people try to be humble and see what's going on in front of you. Okay, I want peace. I've been fighting for Palestine for 50 years, yes, and I will carry on till the end of my life. And I'm French and I'm Christian, but please, I want justice. And Hamas, please, Hamas will have never existed if Israel didn't exist. Therefore, that is what I say. Sorry, I'm so passionate. And
thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Una.
explain Boko Haram then, since you're
I'm
so
sorry.
educated and passionate.
Hold on, Oren. If you need to ask another questions, raise your hand and you get back in line, please. Una, thank you.
You're
Khalil,
welcome.
anything, or can we move on?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Don Raphael.
Yep. Okay.
Can you guys lower your hands after you ask the questions?
First of all, I want to thank the IPC and the work that it does, and I want to thank our guest, Khalil. You know, I've been sitting in on these simulations for a year or two. I'm a big proponent of it. I would love to see the IPC start registering voters and in Israel and Palestine and build up a movement that way. But I think the biggest obstacle to something like the IPC, and I'll turn this into a question for our guest, Khalil, is that the extremists on both sides, and let's just take the asymmetry of power out of the equation for a moment in making this statement, are the loudest voices. And for certain, the radical right-wing extremism in the Israeli government, and I can't speak to the Palestinian leadership, but my question is, I consider myself a peace activist. I've been involved with Combatants for Peace in many organizations for a number of years. How do we get our voices to speak together? And what do we need to see from the Palestinian leadership to show that there's a pro-peace activism that we can work on together? And I speak from an American perspective, I have to state that. So I look at it from a diaspora point of view, but I think we have to have a lot of power from here to help there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. This is an excellent question. I think the main thing of why, I mean, in my mind, the reason why extremists are the loudest for two reasons. One, because they hijack identity usually and certain grievances, right? Like on the Israeli side, they managed to hijack the religious Jewish identity and sort of messianic view, the prophecies, etc. And they're using that. But they also hijacked the security part, and security in Israel is part of the Israeli identity. If you are an Israeli, you're born to think from a security point of view beside religion. Not everyone is religious, but everyone is concerned about security. On the Palestinian side, something similar happens. Hamas knows how to use the religious feeling, the religious connections, etc., and sort of use it to mobilize and to base to make their base more excited about their more extremist point of view, if you wish. The other thing is that they also hijack the grievances, the very real pain that the occupation is real, that the occupation is happening. But another element that they add to it on the Palestinian side is that they've managed to show how the peace camp and the people who are pro-peace, pro-negotiation, whatever, are such a failure. And the truth is, we are such a failure. We've been working for over 30 years for two-state solution or any type of solution or even peaceful resistance, etc., and we failed miserably.
Right.
So how do we convince? Because here's the thing: they're like, you know, even among Hamas's supporters, I would assume, and based on like some reading I've done before, it's like about 20% or 25% of them usually are logically committed to the entire vision of Hamas, and the rest are committed to a certain part, such as resistance, etc. And if you really look at these people, they're usually, if you convince them of another idea, they change. And that's what public opinion tells us. Like a lot of supportive of Hamas, if you convince them that, look, there is like, let's say during the 2008 negotiation with Olmert, so many of the Palestinians were supportive of negotiation, even those who voted for Hamas in 2006. Matter of fact, majority of those who voted for Hamas supported negotiation and two-state solution. That's the paradox of it. So if we, as a peace movement, succeed in showing the extremist that it's working, that the peaceful means are producing the type of results that will make your life easier, that will seize the pain of the occupation, that will produce your rights, that will stop the killing, etc. I'm not saying the most extreme like Sinwar or the heads of the organization will come and support us. No, but I think the majority of the supportive and the base will come to our side. I think that's the challenge for us. How do the Palestinians do that? Again, I am literally not saying the asymmetry of power because I want to believe that we are weak and we can do nothing. I am telling you again, I wish that we had more things to do as the Palestinians, so I would do it. It's just the truth is that we've tried, and even if we try all our power, as long as the other side is not responding to us, we just can't do it. Because here's the thing: we've had more than the last 15 years, and the West Bank full commitment for peace in terms of at least actual, you know, violent versus not violent. You can say whatever you want about the BA, but in terms of peace, there is a commitment for it, and we got in return more humiliation. So I don't know if there is another mean to do that where we will not get a humiliation and get actual response from the Israelis, and this will bring about a change. But with this type of governments we are dealing with in Israel, the unfortunate reality, we will not get any positive response.
Okay, let's call Nancy,
Thank
then
you.
Saeed, then Shlomo, and then I'm going to pose another question for Khalil. I'm going to put you on the spot, Khalil, today. Go ahead, Nancy. Nancy, unmute your mic.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
Go.
Well, there's just many approaches that have to be made to develop a viable peace movement so they're actually heard on the corporate-owned media, which is not easy. But what I would say is that while I agree with Joseph to focus on the future, from my perspective, in the United States, we have to show past, present, and future connections. There are many people in this country who do not know anything about the history of Palestine. They do of Israel. It is true that anti-Semitism persists in areas in the United States, but Palestine is like a blank. So while many of us are learning from books and YouTube, the framing has got to be on past, present, future connections. United States is a country
Of both people.
that imposed Jim Crow for 70 to 100 years, depending on how you define that, in our own country, in our own history. And we didn't have a civil rights movement without connecting past, present, and future. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Saeed, I'm sorry, Saeed, go ahead.
I'm surprised how Oren is making these questions, and
Saeed.
just really, I don't believe somebody. Khalil, my question to you, as a young Palestinian, Palestinian who live in America, we know after October 7th, things are changed. And as a matter of fact, I never see IPC effective the way I see it today after the October 7th, because we have really an extreme happened in Gaza. The PA is open for negotiation and been extending their hand for negotiation, and nothing happened. As a Palestinian who live in America and seeing IPC, seeing Code Bank, seeing Jewish for Peace, how can we move forward and start acting effectively to make changes among Jewish and Palestinian first together, and then go to the next level where we get involved in politics in America? Like for example, I like the gentleman who said that we need to start registering people to act in this organization and to do things in action. How you see yourself if you are part of this organization and you have the support where we can really start taking action, where we start today?
Excellent question. I think, I don't know in terms of for this particular organization, because I'm new. I just was introduced to it last week. So maybe Joseph can answer more to that part. But on the broader sense, I think we are moving on the right direction. And it's tragic that it took, obviously, the massacre of October 7th to move there, and the genocide that's happening in Gaza. So I wish we moved toward that direction before, but it's the unfortunate reality that it took this much violence to move there. And the unfortunate reality is that we've seen this violence coming. But overall, the movement is there in terms of knowledge, in terms of like people are aware that things are bad and we need a solution, we need peace. But the movement is not there in terms of working in a constructive manner, meaning I don't think it is enough to acknowledge that there is, let's say, violent or genocide or terrorism or whatever is happening over there. It's important to acknowledge it, but it's not enough. We need to take it to the step after, which is let's move toward building something. For example, since day one of after October 7th, what happened in Gaza, people start calling for ceasefire. I was obviously supportive of ceasefires since day one, but I personally was really more hopeful that people wouldn't be demanding ceasefire. People would be demanding into the conflict and into the occupation. That imagine all this energy we were bringing about is not saying, oh, let's have a ceasefire, and then maybe in 2 years, Hamas and Israel will fight again. Or in 3 years, let's talk about into the conflict and into the occupation right now. Just Hamas wouldn't exist anymore. The occupation wouldn't exist anymore. Let's change the entire structure. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to bring about this kind of actual actionable policies. But that's what I think we should be working on.
Thank you. Go ahead, Shlomo.
Yeah, one moment. Let me just. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to clarify something. And then Owen talked about, I don't know if we're still here. Yeah, talked about hatred of education for hatred. I grew up in Israel, and the underlying kind of deep, not exactly on the surface, education was to hate Arabs. So don't tell me about. And if I were a Palestinian, I would hate Israelis, of course. So It's not the point. The point is going back to the Zionism. There were two, in my view, and I'm reading a lot about it now. So in my view, there are two Zionisms. There is the Zionism that said, okay, the Jews have to control themselves after all of these pogroms and all of them, especially the Holocaust and so on. So the Jews need a state. Okay, so decided to do it in the most popular, one of the most populated places on earth. They could, of course, pick New York, you know, like Manhattan, but they picked Palestine. And of course, now there is a problem of demography. So there were two approaches. One was to have equal rights to build together with the Palestinians and to have a state that is binational, etc., etc. Those were not the majority, and they eventually were swept aside. And the main other stream, which dominated, was, okay, we need to replace. We need a transfer. We need to transfer the local population somewhere so that we can have the land. Land without people, for people without land, great. Unfortunately, this is not that simple. And of course, the Nakba came. And the Nakba meaning basically ethnic cleansing. And I'm not, you can read Ilan Pape and even Morris about it. And until today, there is a problem. Because now the Israelis face, they want still the land. They never want, the Israeli governments never wanted peace. They always wanted just land and land and land. And of course, you have to do something with the people who sit on that land. So you need to hate them and you need to get rid of them somehow with violence and so on. Okay, so now the Israelis face a huge dilemma. Until, say, 50 years ago, you could talk about two-state solution. They still stick to it because there is nothing else if you want to maintain the demography of a majority of Jews. Otherwise, it is one country, one state for all of the people, and it's then you just give up on Zionism as an idea, and it is very hard for them to understand it. This is the crux of the problem. If we somehow manage, because now my leftist friends in Israel, what they say, look, if you have equal right, it will become Rwanda. They will just kick us out because, you know, because that's what naturally will be done. Because this is, we live in their land. We stole the land and now we live there. So of course they want it back. So, so they have this fear on one hand. On the other hand, the two-state solution is a dead solution. It cannot, I don't know, maybe it can. There are some ideas. But even if it can, I mean, what kind of existence is this? Anyway, so I just wanted to point this out, and then for Oren Menashe especially, and many Israelis like him who were, you know, like me, brainwashed from day one, and to feel that this is belong to us, and Hamas are the bad guys, and we are the good guys, and so on and so forth. I want to tell you, Oren, that if I were a Palestinian living in Gaza, I would be Hamas 100%. Okay, so, and you too, for sure you. I'm not sure about me, but for you, I'm sure.
So
that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, Khalil has to actually.
I'm not a murderer, but thanks.
Khalil has to.
Yeah, I probably
hold
would
on.
be protesting every day, though.
Bro.
Of course.
Khalil has to go in a little bit, so we're gonna take just to the last two people, me and Alan, to speak. Khalil, is Khalil still here? Where? Oh, there you go. I'm sorry. And the slides, the tiles moved. Okay, so we spoke a few days ago about this, and I think that some of the like what Oren had mentioned about it kind of surprised me that you should accept things as the way they are. So are we supposed to be accepting to be a conquered people? And then the comments of the Palestinians had a deal, they could have accepted it. And I even find this among the most liberal and peace-seeking Jews that, number one, Palestinians are expected to accept less than what every other nation in the world has. And this is even if you go to like very pro-peace Israelis, they feel like our security trumpets anything over a Palestinians having full rights as a sovereign nation, or as a people who are sovereign and rights to self-determination. And the other thing that we specifically spoke about, you and I, the other day, is that treatment of Palestinians now in the West Bank being arrested by Israel. It's like whether or not we come to you with flowers or a gun, we're treated the same way. So if you'll be arrested if you walk up to an Israeli soldier or the Israeli government and say, here's peace, here's a flower, they'll shoot you. If you come up with a gun, they'll shoot you. So people who are non-violence, organizations that are dedicated to non-violence and peace are being treated as if they were Hamas. So if they don't make a distinction between militants and peace, pro-peace activists, this is what's killing the Palestinian movement for peace.
What's your question?
That's a question.
So my question is, what do we do about it? I don't know. I mean, so this is, do you think this is what makes it difficult when people say, why are Palestinians not accepting, why they're not accepting a deal? Like, for example, we had Olmert here. And Olmert, I believe he said that Mahmoud Abbas did not say no to the deal. But it's like this, if we don't accept these unjust solutions, then why are we held responsible for you guys don't want peace?
No, I think it's quite simple. The answer is like an Israeli is usually, or this an Israeli pro-Israel view is usually filled with contradiction in itself. But at the very core of the contradictions, there is a very, very clear assumption. And it doesn't take a lot to get it out. And the assumption is that there are so many things that are wrong, could never be accepted to me, but on the other side, these things don't exist. Meaning that, for example, if you ask Oren right now, why don't Israel accept to give us half of Tel Aviv, for example, or half of Israel? 50%. He'll be like, oh, this is out of the questions. It's international law. International law become a thing all the time. Like, international borders, recognition, etc., become a thing. So then he asks you, why don't you just simply accept to give us like 10% of the West Bank or whatever? And you say international law, nation, our rights, borders, and all these things become irrelevant. All of a sudden, these things don't make sense. So that's the very core of the issue, is that the pro-Israel view on this, Nasir, don't see you as equal. Don't see you as a people, don't see you as legitimate. That is the core of the issue. Now, how do you solve that? But by realizing that the people, we are not asking Israelis for something radical, believe it or not. We're asking them to just see us equally as people as they are, nothing more, nothing less. We're not even asking them anymore to recognize, that we are the natives, that we were there, we were like ethnic cleanse, etc. I mean, all these are facts, right? Historically, their historians acknowledge it. I mean, it was Zionist historians who denied this completely. Then comes the new Zionist historians who recognize that. And then now even right-wing historians recognize it. Those who follow the Jabotinsky sort of thing, it will say, no, we did it, but it was right that we did it. It's good that we ethnic cleanse them. They deserve it. That's the only way we could have preserved a Jewish state. It's worth it, right? So we're not even saying, let's recognize all that. We are saying there are legitimate international law, international system. There are very clear, things that has to do that never been done. You just have to accept them and accept the Palestinian rights. All these are rejected. Now, on the peaceful means, yes. I mean, everything has failed. I mean, armed resistance has failed. Peaceful means has failed. Negotiation has failed. Let's be honest. That's why I think right now the only other mean that we didn't use, and still it wasn't fulfilled yet, that the entire world has to say to Israel no. And that's, believe it or not, some Israelis live in a world, those who are on the right, where they feel like even if the entire world turns against us, it wouldn't affect us, so we can still survive. But those who are reasonable on more, like, say, left or center, know that Israel cannot survive by itself. It's just simple fact. They cannot. They're not a superpower. And believe it or not, in the region, they're not even that significant of a power if you take off the Western support for them. And I think that's what we have to focus on. Unless we see an Israeli generation and leaders that's saying, no, we want peace and we'll do it even apart from the international pressure. But because we see you as humans, we see you as equal, but this is far from rich at this point, unfortunately. Nasser, I'll take one more question and then
sure. Yeah. Alan, go ahead. Alan, you have the last question. Thank you, Khalil, for your patience.
Of course.
Alan, you have to unmute.
Unmute. Thank you. It was an excellent discussion. There's so much to add, and it's just about over. The big picture is that unless there is a peace all over the world, ending this war system of domination and beginning cooperation, the whole world system, life system, is under threat by the climate and the wars that we go on as though they have no consequence. This is all over the world, and Israel has to see, and Palestine as well, in a larger picture. We need a pro-Semitism that looks at hospitality as the common thread of our cultures. It needs to separate ourselves from the imperial notion of the 19th century and before, that sovereignty is involved with a king and a horse, a border and a land and an army. Sovereignty is the connection in people's hearts, and Palestine is all over Palestine with no border between us. It's in the hearts of the people. Likewise, Israel, and that extends far beyond the borders. And we need to separate ourselves from the sense that sovereignty is connected to land rather than to an alliance of people cooperating together in the imperative to be a light to the nation for peace.
So Alan, our guest is about to leave in about a minute. So do you have a question for him? And then after he leaves, you can comment, because he really has to go.
Just keep struggling, Khalil. I appreciated what you said.
Thank you. Thank you, Khalil, for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to more of this.
Yeah, Khalil is gonna go. I think
you, Khalil.
If you guys want to stick
Good
around,
job.
I
think he has to run.
appreciate you
Thank you,
coming
Khalil.
on.
Of
Thank you so
course.
much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to interrupt Joseph, but he was texting me saying he had to urgently leave.
Bonne nuit.
Bonne nuit.
Brothers, I believe Netanyahu is not realizing that every war he started right now, as much he expand in wars, he gonna create more hate against the Zionist state, and he's bringing catastrophe. He's bringing back destruction for himself. So
he doesn't care for what anybody thinks.
Yeah, but
he's for his position.
Yeah, but Shlomo, according to this morning, his polls are doing great. It seems like he must know what he's doing, because he's holding on to power.
Because
his polls,
he know how to create fear for the people, my friend. He's uniting people under fear, and he's expanding hate in the Arab countries now.
Yeah.
How's the anger right now?
I'm gonna make a future prediction, and I'm not like the most smartest guy in the world. He will be elected again, the new prime minister, the continuing new prime minister of Israel. Trust me, he's gonna come out of this. He's a cat. You throw him out of a building, he'll land on his feet.
Yeah, but they tried to kill him yesterday at the airport.
I think his time has come.
Really? I don't know, Don. I said that maybe a few months ago, but now I'm kind of, I don't know. He looks like he's gonna
I
come
understand
out of
your
this.
skepticism for sure. I feel the same.
Did you hear about
the Houthis tried to kill him at the airport. Yeah. They said that. They're not very good at timing. They're not very good at math. All they've ever studied is the Quran, so they're morons. So they failed. So it's not even worth talking about.
But there's some hope. Good night. Ciao, ciao.
Right.
Good night.
If you want every politician you don't like to be killed, you're not part of the solution.
Okay,
that's some good advice. You should tell your prime minister that.
Yeah,
I would.
Yeah,
I have no problem standing up to guys like him. He doesn't scare me.
Thank you all.
You know, I'm here because I want peace. You may
but
think
your words are inconsistent with
your life.
Yes. Okay.
Welcome to life. It's full of contradictions. What are you talking about, man?
You just said that killing opponent leaders doesn't lead to peace, but in your comments you're saying that peace will come when we kill Sinwar, which I'm just saying it just contradicts what you're saying. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with you. I'm just saying it contradicts what you're saying.
Okay. I'll accept that, but Sinwar is a little bit of a different case.
You created Sinwar, Oran. Your government.
Yes, I personally fucked his mother and gave birth to him.
Whoa. Easy.
Okay, guys.
A respectful conversation.
All right.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Well, don't accuse me of creating shitheads like Sinwar.
Next time.
Bye, everybody.